Good evening, everyone. I really cannot come in with any sort of upbeat attitude today. This is the Extra Mile for May 26, 2022. And if you've clicked on this episode, you've probably noticed there is not a number on this episode. And that is for a good reason, because myself and Christopher Lehman, who is here with me, we had a conversation before the start of the program. And as we all know now, as it is now Thursday, a tragedy as American as apple pie took place at Robb Elementary School, where an individual walked into the school with an AR-15 and 4 adults and 18 little angels are no longer with us. We do know that the NASCAR All-Star race was in Texas. Texas Governor Greg Abbott gave the command to start engines. We know Abbott's history with gun control. We're going to talk about a lot of that tonight. So if you're looking for some racing review, I would say shut this episode off or skip ahead about 30 minutes maybe, and we'll talk about it on the back half. But today it just does not feel right to try and talk about motorsports and distract from an issue that has absolutely gripped our country to the core. I don't know when the first school shooting was officially recorded. The one everyone remembers is Columbine. I was 8 years old. At that time, we said never again, and it's happened again and again and again and again. Just this year, there's been 286 mass shootings in this country. In just the past 2 weeks, in Chris's neck of the woods in western Buffalo, 10 African Americans lost their lives in a senseless act of hate as people were just going to the grocery store.
One of them was actually from my hometown. Well, not my hometown, but where I currently live.
I hate to hear that. That's even worse, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's about 26,000 people here, so I obviously know very few of those 26,000, and he is one of the many that I had never met or encountered, or I hadn't even heard his name until Buffalo. But it doesn't make the tragedy any more or less tragic than it was.
Hold on, I'm just trying to make a tweet. We are, obviously, this is live recording. I'm just trying to make a tweet so that people understand that if they're trying to listen for some racing talk, you're going to need to hold off for a little bit. Something. There we go. And that was unofficially the deadliest mass shooting of the year. And just 2 weeks later in Texas, as I said, 21 lives are no longer with us. And I had planned to try to do a normal show, but as I've seen, folks are hurting. They're angry. I'm angry. I left social media because the same arguments that we have every time about this have come up about who can do what and who can't do what and what the president can and cannot do. I'm just tired of it. And before I go any further, I would say I'm speaking, not my professional life, but as a American citizen in my private life. When is enough going to be enough? When is one more life taken in a senseless act of violence going to be the last one? when are we going to wake up and understand that the Second Amendment does not mean that everyone has unfettered, unfiltered, unlimited access to firearms? When is it going to be enough? How many more kids does it have to be? How many more fathers? How many more mothers, sisters, brothers, grandparents? How many more people got to go before we finally wake up and realize that we've set this country up to be a war zone the way it's set up? And I'll back up and let Chris in on this conversation. It feels like at this point, once every couple of weeks, there's one of these shootings. And to be honest, most of them I blanked out until this one. And this one was just a tipping point because, again, it's another elementary school that feels the wrath of this country's obsession with guns.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And the sad reality is that we've just become desensitized to these types of things. Just so a little background around me. I come from a very conservative area of the country. I have a very conservative family. I was raised in a conservative household. And my Facebook timeline, which I deleted Facebook for quite a while, actually, just because it's a toxic place that adds almost zero value to my life. And I downloaded it, I don't know, 2 weeks ago again, just for reasons. And but I didn't delete it because I was like, oh, maybe I'll just give Facebook another shot, and what the behavior I've seen over the last 2 days has been shocking. And there are people that I will never be able to speak to again. I will never be able to look them in the face. I will never be able to pretend to have a shred of respect left for them. And some of the posts I'm seeing specifically calling out, saying we sent $40 billion in aid to Ukraine. And if we use that among all of the schools in the country, and I haven't checked the math on this to know if it's right or wrong, but they say
the math is usually never right in those.
Correct. That's why I don't want to say like, and they talk about the 40 billion and how each school would have $400,000. I haven't checked the math, so I can't tell you if that's right or wrong. But the same people that talk about how it's a mental health issue, which to a degree it is, right? The gun is a tool, is what it comes down to. It doesn't have a mind of its own. It cannot fire bullets. It can't aim itself. So yes, there is definitely a epidemic of mental health in this country that does 100% need to be addressed. The stigmas around seeking mental health need to end. We can't be calling people psychos or loonies or freaks or anything. We need to the people that say that this is a mental health issues are the same people that will shame family members and friends who seek mental health. So the hypocrisy is real, and both sides are hypocritical. And I wouldn't say that the left is necessarily hypocritical on this point, but that's the left does have its problems.
We'll get into it because I want to talk about it. We're gonna dissect all of this. So continue.
Yeah, and so just there's a subset of people who on my Facebook timeline have said it's not the gun's fault, which to a degree is true, but to a degree is not. And those people tend to never acknowledge the victims. They only acknowledge the tool. Mm-hmm. And they're the same people who again, will say this is the real problem. It's not the guns, it's the mental health. And then when one of their family members says that they're depressed, they say, well, pull your pants up, go outside, exercise. Like, it's, you need to figure your shit out, but mental health is fake, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a certain level of hypocrisy there. But one of my cousins in particular, I just went off on him on Facebook because I was like, you've made 4 posts in within 24 hours. He had shared 4 things about defending the gun. It's not the gun's fault. We need to use some of the $40 billion, and rather than sending $40 billion to Ukraine, we need to put armed guards at every school and yada yada yada. I'm sure you know, you can guess what these posts were about. And so on one, I finally commented and I said his name, and then I said, your lack of empathy is truly enlightening and disheartening at the same time. You've shared X amount of posts defending guns, saying it's not their fault, yet you have yet to publicly empathize with the families who lost loved ones. You have yet to say or share anything regarding those poor kids and those teachers and the other I believe the gunman had also killed his grandmother as well. And you refuse to acknowledge any of their passing. You refuse to and I'm just going to leave it at acknowledge their passing. Yet you post multiple times about how the gun's not the fault, and at the same time, this cousin of mine has a daughter who is probably in the 4th grade, if I had to guess. And so I just went off on him, and he still hasn't responded because he knows that there's nothing he can say back without looking worse than he did. And you know, I'm going to delete Facebook. I haven't yet, but just even talking right now, I've come to the conclusion that I'm back out. And at the end of the day, this is the type of behavior that we need to change, right? Conservatives are suddenly calling out for more mental health awareness and spending, yet they only do this in times of crisis to avoid conversations about I'm not even saying banning guns, because everybody knows that that's not going to happen, but you can.
And I'm going to cut in there for a moment because I do want to touch on that point. I've seen so many posts talking about, well, this country banned guns and that country banned guns and this country did this and that. None of those countries that you mention have a constitutional amendment or a constitutional right to firearms. None of those countries have that in their constitution. The only way you would be able to consider that would be to make an amendment that would repeal the second. That is never going to happen in anyone's lifetimes. No one is going to take that chance of bringing that to the floor of Congress and trying to survive the vitriol that's going to come next. These people stormed that building. These people that are probably pro-gun stormed a building on January 6th over a lie. What do you think they're going to do about this?
Yeah,
it's never going to happen. So just...
And I just want to add to that, Daryl. The other thing that people are, and it just shows the rhetoric that's out there and the complete lack of situational awareness. Mm-hmm. What most people on the right fail to remember is that they own the Supreme Court for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Right? They own the Supreme Court. There is nothing, and this passed so silently, Daryl. I'm not aware if you even have heard of this. Since you're in the news, you probably have. But the Supreme Court silently got rid of uh, the appeals process federally for inmates who have been wrongfully convicted. Um, so you obviously people get public defenders if they don't have the resources to hire their own attorney, and if your attorney has prosec no, not I shouldn't say prosecutorial, but if your public defender is provides inadequate defense to you, and that can be proved, the federal government no longer will take on your case. So, um, and one of the cases, so
Yeah, I see. I had to look it up.
a man in
But
Arizona was accused and convicted of sexually assaulting and killing his four-year-old niece, I think it was, or something along those lines. And his public defender did not obtain medical examiner reports. And when he went to the appeals court, his state appointed and lawyer did not get the medical records. And then one of the advocacy groups who take on wrongful convictions, I forget which one what it was. There's a couple, obviously. But one of them got the reports, and based on the medical examiner's report, it was concluded that he could not have sexually assaulted and killed this girl because he was known to not be in the area. Like, it has been ruled out that he could not have been around, right? And if any of his lawyers before this group had just read through that report, he would have been cleared. But now he's on the death row, and this latest ruling has made it so that he has to petition the state of Arizona, the one who convicted him and sentenced him to death. He has to rely on he has to petition the governor, basically, to be pardoned, even though it is proved that he did not do it, because the Supreme Court says that it's the state's rights to decide, and that the federal government has no business defending citizens over the state's rights, even when there's inadequate defense. And I don't mean to hijack the greater conversation that we were doing, but this is also
it proves exactly the point I think you're about to go to. So continue. I think I know where this is going.
So this is the right hand of the government, who is pro-life, who wants nothing more than to protect the sanctity of life. Yet they are not only are they willing and ready, but they have already taken action to ensure that innocent people are killed for crimes that they did not commit.
Yep.
And they are going to continue making sure that your guns go nowhere. And they will not listen to a common sense law. I have seen posts that say that they need to repeal the federal statute that prevents felons from owning firearms. I have actually seen somebody on my Facebook page say that the right to bear arms, in nowhere does it limit anybody, and that felons and basically just that everybody in America, no matter your past, deserves to own a firearm. And that blew my mind in ways that I can't even begin to tell you about, Daryl.
I don't even know how to follow that up, other than it's a symptom of the problem. And the inspiration for how this episode is going is basically from the Yankees and the Tampa Bay Rays, who have decided they're not going to tweet about their game today, and instead are tweeting out stats about the situation regarding gun violence. And in 2020, the leading death for children, despite a pandemic, was firearms. we had a spate there in 2019 before the whole pandemic started. There was a rash of cases where children were stumbling onto firearms and accidentally harming themselves to a permanent degree. And now we have things like this, you know, and this is after Sandy Hook. We have done nothing to deal with the problem, and it just keeps getting worse. And we did talk about a little bit about the Texas All-Star race. Greg Abbott was the start, or was the Grand Marshal. I'm sorry, Grand Marshal to start the race. Now, we did hear from some IndyCar drivers about the situation, and they expressed their dismay. We haven't heard a lot from NASCAR or the drivers. And unfortunately, because of NASCAR's roots, I don't think we're going to hear anything. I mean, the NRA sponsors a race in NASCAR. Richard Childress used to have a high position in the NRA until he was basically forced to resign. The NRA sponsors RCR's cars from a time.
Look at Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, Tyler Reddick. Go ahead.
He was silenced by Richard Childress for standing out during the George Floyd saga. You know, he took a stance on Twitter publicly, and later, obviously, something happened within the RCR organization, and he was forced to delete that tweet and backtrack. So you're right, Daryl. We will not hear anything publicly out of any NASCAR driver, not the organization, because of the fan base, the overwhelming white Southern fan base.
Mm-hmm. The only hope that we have is the drivers are getting younger, but again, it's an ownership issue and it's a culture issue down there. I mean, Texas Celebration, you know, the Wild West, they fire off the pistols, which I'm no way in saying that should go away because of what happened here, but it's how things are done in Texas. They basically live by the gun in the state of Texas. They have some of the most open gun laws in the nation, if not the most open gun laws in the nation. So do I expect anything to change after this situation? Absolutely not. Not in Texas. But I didn't expect anything to change anyway. Because like I said, in 2012, a classroom of second graders was turned into past tense. President Obama brought an assault weapons ban as part of a gun reform package. After that, it did not survive Congress. We as a nation said as a whole, dead second graders was okay as long as we get to keep our firearms. At that very moment, I threw my hands up and said, that's it. This debate's over. Because if this doesn't sway anyone, nothing ever will. And nothing's ever going to change. And I don't know how to make people care about this situation. And Arthur Parsons, who is joining us, as 50 senators continually refuse to do anything. Guess who one of their lobbyists are? Oh, we talked about them a little bit earlier if you just got here. So we know that situation completely.
So I do have one possible, I don't want to say thing to look forward to because it's really not. Mm-hmm. But I saw a article, and they were talking about specifically the voting tendencies by generation,
Mm-hmm.
and how it, kids. I'm a millennial. I'm 30, um, and how millennials and Gen Z are overwhelmingly left leaning, and boomers and the silent generation are overwhelmingly right leaning. And this is why I said it's not necessarily something to look forward to, but as the boomers age out, I think is a fair way to put it. Um, and the Gen Z starts coming into voting age, we should see the political spectrum in America change as
Mm-hmm.
the older white very religious voters no longer vote, um dancing around the point, but in an obvious way, I think. um but the political atmosphere should change, and with that, maybe we can actually have some real change.
We will see. Um, and that's the way that any change is going to come, is that people are going to have to get out to the polls and vote. And that's not discounting some of the just horrendous voting laws that have been made, but get into a little bit about what happened in Texas. This individual that we are not going to name got access to the school and was in there for about an hour with an AR-15. There is some controversy about what happened with the police officers there. There's one report that says 2 officers were injured in a gun battle with the assailant before he gained access to the school. Other reports have come out that are saying that people were begging the police to go in and they failed to do so. I am not going to try and parse that right now and what's true and what's not, because to be honest, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because no one should have been in the position to have to go into that school to deal with anything that happened on like that on Tuesday in the first place. Eventually, he was taken down by a Border Patrol support team that was called to assist these officers. But before they were able to do that, 21 individuals were killed, including 4 adults. I'm going to bring up a list of those victims because we did get a report before we came on that I wanted to touch on. Irma Garcia, who was one of the 2 teachers that tragically lost her lives. Her husband unfortunately passed today from a broken heart.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Daryl,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that anybody listening is going to say, "Come on, are you serious?"
Mm-hmm.
That is 100% serious. He had been attending funeral plans for his wife, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously he was surrounded by family and, I'm sure, loving friends. And when they returned home from making those plans, I guess a good sized party of them came back to his house with him to continue the support process. And when he was sitting in his chair, they said that he slumped over and they attempted to resuscitate him. They could not, and he passed away. So this was not a suicide attempt. This was not anything. This was witnessed by dozens of family members, that he, in his grief, passed away.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that because
Yeah.
It's true. You can pass from a broken heart, and unfortunately, for their family members and friends, who were dealing with burying their friend and loved one way too early. Now they are unfortunately tasked with burying two.
And there's a lot of people this week that are planning funerals that they never thought they'd have to plan for their kids, because we cannot figure out a simple issue that arguably the second most dangerous item a person can have outside of a car, given if you've been out on the roadways. We have been unable to figure out how to properly regulate it. And now as we look forward, how do we change it? I mean, what needs to be done is already out there. There needs to be a universal background check system. There needs to be a more stringent licensing process of how people get firearms. Does that include a psychiatric evaluation? I don't know, because we don't want to demonize mental health while trying to fix this absolutely horrid situation. There probably needs to be an examination of reinstating the assault weapons ban. That probably needs to come back. And the systems that are supposed to communicate from state to state need to either be assisted or coerced into working with each other. Now, how that happens, I don't know. But we have to start closing these loopholes, or this is just going to continue. And I shudder to say this, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. And if we're being realistic, we know that assault weapons bans are not coming.
No.
And just for some background on me, I grew up in a household where I had guns. My dad has enough guns to arm a small army. If I'm being honest. But while I grew up in a house that the Second Amendment was very important, my dad does not own an assault weapon. He owns shotguns and rifles. He basically hunting, right? He has, I mean, multiple dozens of guns, 100% all of them for hunting. And he also has a couple pistols for personal protection, which he's never had to use. He hopes to never have to use them. He doesn't want to, but he's one of those cash guys, not credit card. So if he's purchasing a vehicle, which he has done in cash, sometimes he's got $50,000-$60,000 in cash on him. So yes, he's going to be armed in those scenarios. But so I grew up in a house where the Second Amendment was very important. I learned how to handle guns the proper way, and there was a sense of finality instilled in me from a young age, where my dad taught me, like, if you pull that trigger, you can never take back what happened. And that doesn't matter what you're pointing it at. You could be pointing it at a target, right? Mm-hmm. You pull that trigger, you will destroy that target, whether it's a piece of paper, a hay bale, whatever it is. You can never take back pulling that trigger. Never. And and I was scared to touch him without my dad around, even into my early teens, right? As I reached 16, 17, 18, yeah, I would handle guns. I'd clean them. I'd do what I needed to do, but that sense of finality was always there. And I think that a very reasonable, I don't want to say compromise, but a very reasonable step forward in the correct direction would be to raise the weapon or wait, raised the minimum age to purchase firearms from 18 years old. When Daryl, you're a guy just like me. You know that when you're 18 years old, your head isn't done developing. Our
No, it's not.
brains, as a male, our brains aren't finished developing until our early 20s. 22, 23. You can't rent a car until you're 25 years old because car rental companies say you're not developed upstairs yet to know to be safe with our vehicles. When you're young, you think you're invincible, so we don't want you in our vehicles. And tobacco products, alcohol, you have to be 21 years old. And I think it's time. And I'm just going to point out that I saw a statistic, and I don't know if it's true or not, so don't take this as fact, but I saw a thing that said that a woman has not killed multiple people with a firearm since the year 1980 or 1970, something like that.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that's true or not. It seems a little far fetched, but at the same time, very realistic. Um, as women are typically, um, they don't have anger issues to go on a killing spree. Usually, if they do kill, a lot of times it's in self defense, or after years of abuse. And maybe now I'm generalizing, so I should probably steer away from that. But overwhelmingly, schools are shot up by young men, um, particularly ones that look like me, unfortunately. Um, but overall, it doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you are, what anything you are. If you are a boy, your brain is not developed until your early 20s. And this is in no way justifying what any school shooter has ever, any shooter or person who has committed any type of crime in their late teens or early 20s has committed, but your brain has not developed yet.
And they
And
shouldn't be running around with firearms.
correct. And if you built legislation around raising the age of owning firearms, purchasing, um, and then did things to enforce it, like with alcohol. If you get busted selling alcohol to minors, you're in big trouble. And I think that would be a fair compromise, in my opinion, is raising the age to 21 and then tightening up laws for gun owners to say, like, look, if your guns are used in a crime by someone under the age of 21, you are in big trouble and you are held equally as liable as the person who did it. And in the case of many mass murderers who end up being one of the casualties of their spree, you're charged with every murder, including theirs.
Mm-hmm. And that actually happened in Michigan, where there was a couple that has been charged with aiding what their son did, who committed a mass shooting.
And that's what needs to happen, is you need to start holding people accountable, particularly the parents or legal guardians, and you pair that with a raised age to purchase firearms. And I'm a Second Amendment person, right? I believe that everybody has the right to bear arms. I don't necessarily think that anyone needs an AR, an assault rifle. I mean, and this is where, like, me being a very knowledgeable person when it comes to guns, you can't necessarily ban semi-automatic weapons, right? I have rifles, hunting rifles, that are semi-automatic. And all semi-automatic means is that you don't have to manually reload the chamber. The gun uses the momentum to do it for you. And pistols, hunting rifles, there are even shotguns that are semi-automatic, and these aren't used. It's specifically the tactical assault style, military style weapon, but there's no way to legislate that out without do you see what I'm saying, Daryl? Like, there's a technicality where you outlaw semi-automatic weapons, and now tomorrow I'm a felon because
Yeah.
I have hunting rifles that wouldn't even be, and not that I would even remotely think of it, but you would, it just would not be realistic to take a hunting style rifle on a spree. It's too big, too clunky, but it would make me a felon overnight.
Yep. As we get ready to go into the weekend, as we are going to call this show a little bit early this evening, as we get ready to go into the weekend, we know that we have a tremendous amount of racing this weekend. We have the Indianapolis 500. We have the Monaco Grand Prix, which we know I am not that much of a fan of. And we have the Coke 600. The Memorial Day Grand Prix is together again. And as we remember those that fell serving this country this weekend while you're watching the races, try and take the time to think of the people that fell just living their normal lives because a country that was made for the free failed to protect them. And we must do more as a country. That's the only reason that I made this episode, not to be doom and gloom, but to hopefully use it as a call to action to say, we must do more. We must make this enough so that we don't have to wake up again and see on the news that another school has lost its angels and its teachers. So that a grocery store has not lost its customers and individuals have not lost grandparents, parents, siblings, loved ones that just went in to get dinner or some snacks or whatever they wanted from that store. This country is hurting, and it's been hurting for some time when it comes to gun violence. And as a nation, we must do more to treat the wound so that this country can prosper to its true ideals. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that. We have to do more because enough has to be enough. And before we go out tonight, I just want to read in memorandum the 21 names of the 21 lives that will never come back again, that went into Robb Elementary School on Tuesday, May 25th, and did not return to their families. Irma Garcia, who was a fourth grade teacher at Robb Elementary. Amari Jo Garza, age 10. Eva Morales, another fourth grade teacher at the school. Xavier Lopez, age 10. Uzziah Garcia, also age 10. Jose Flores Jr., also 10. Lexi Rubio, age 10. Tess Marie Mata, age 10. Nevea Alyssa Bravo, age 10. Eliana Ellie Garcia, age 9. Annabelle Guadalupe Rodriguez, age 10. Jacqueline Jalen Cesares, also I believe age 10. Julia Nicole Sulgero, age 10. And I apologize if I'm butchering the pronunciations of some of these names. My Spanish is not very good. Eliana Elijah Cruz Torres, age 10. And those are some of the lives that were lost. And others, as parents identify, will come out. To those individuals, to those families, we give our deepest condolences, though they may not help in this time. And we will end tonight's show with a moment of silence for those that were lost. Good evening, and we'll be with you next week.